be available on the Coalition of Oregon Land Trust website by tomorrow. And lastly, to keep this interactive, we may post some polls during the presentation to get your response and feedback. And we will also be sending out a survey at the end of the webinar to solicit feedback so we can improve as we do more of these. And I think on that note, we're going to kick it off and try this poll. Also, just while we're waiting for the scrabblers here, we're going to get a sense for who is out there and participating in this webinar. We sent this out on Coalition of Oregon Land Trust listserv, and our partners at Soil and Water Conservation District and some agency partners sent this out as well. So we have a poll. We're just going to try this interactive piece. What organization are you associated with? Please just take a moment to click where, what organization that you closely align with. Hopefully we have a box there for you, and we will kind of get a sense for who's out there. All right, just a couple more seconds. All right. And this is our first time using this particular software. So we were able to see, okay, about half of the folks on the line are land trusts. We have folks from SWCDs, some watershed councils. It's great to see that we've got partners from the public agencies and also some partner organizations. So appreciate the diversity here. It's good to know. All right, I'm just going to switch right over to the goals of today's webinar. I want to just talk about kind of the 4 overarching goals. The first one is to really learn more about how RCPP works on the ground. We have 2 specific case studies, one from Montana and one from Oregon, about successful RCPP applications and projects. The second goal is to understand specifically how land protection fits into the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And again, we're really highlighting the land trust perspective here and hearing from our members why land trust would go through RCPP versus other programs like the Agricultural Land Easement Program. The third goal is to really gain a better understanding of the RCPP application. Hopefully most of you saw that the APF, or the application for program funding, was announced on April 12th. And there's a pretty quick turnaround time. The applications will be due on April 21st. So we're really fortunate to have Lauren Unruh, the Assistant State Conservationist, here with us, who's literally going to walk us through the actual application and be able to kind of synthesize some of the issues that were brought up in the first 2 case studies and really ground truth those with the application. And lastly, this is really about submitting more successful applications in Oregon and hopefully seeing, by example, what really works. And again, I just want to highlight how fortunate we are to have Lauren join us. He was recently on detail in a national role with NRCS and had the ability to review RCPP applications from around the country. So he really has a great perspective on tips that make an application successful and really stand out. So those are our goals for today's webinar. Next, I'm just going to go through today's speakers and do a brief round of introductions before we pass it off to the first case study. Our first presenter is Brendan Weiner, who is the Program Director for the Gallatin Valley Land Trust that's located in beautiful Bozeman, Montana. And we're really lucky to have Brendan here because his RCPP that he's involved with was one of the first to be funded of this program, and he really has some experience of AOL projects that have been funded and some in the pipeline. So very grateful for you, Brendan. Our second case study is about the Wallowa County RCPP, and this is a huge piece of pride for Oregon that this project was recently announced to be funded in December. We have Derek Johnson, who's the Director of Protection and Stewardship with the Nature Conservancy of Oregon, who will be co-presenting with partner organization Wallowa Land Trust. We have Julia Lakes, who is the Conservation Director participating from gorgeous east side of Oregon, Wallowa County. And lastly, we've got Lauren Unruh. Lauren, I'm sorry, we couldn't find a picture of you online. We searched, we scoured the web. So we put in the fawns to symbolize your positive attitude and your great partnership with us. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you to NRCS for co-sponsoring this. And now I'm going to just pass it over to Brendan with Gallatin Valley Land Trust to start us off.
Great, thanks Kelly so much. Hello to everyone. Again, my name's Brendan Weiner. I'm the Program Director of the Gallatin Valley Land Trust here in Bozeman. And we are a land trust that works in a regional area that consists of about 3 counties here. We're located just north of Yellowstone National Park, and we do project work just outside of the park, and then all the way down to Bozeman, and our main focus area is here in the Gallatin Valley, which is also the focus of our RCPP project. Just to give you a sense of what GVLT looks like, we have 9 full-time staff members here on board. We hold 101 conservation easements in and around the Gallatin Valley, which totals about 45,000 acres of land. We work on working farms and ranches, and we have a long history of doing conservation easements on those. Also, you know, key wildlife habitat properties, river corridors. We work on access, and we also have a pretty robust trail system, mostly in and around Bozeman. So we like to think of our programs in 2 ways, our land conservation, land protection, and then a trails program as well that's sort of focused on the Bozeman area. So as far as RCPP goes, I gave this similar presentation at Rally this past October in Minneapolis, and my co-presenters were Jerome Faulkner of NRCS. He's the program manager of RCPP. Also Glenn Schoen, who's the executive director of Grand Traverse Land Trust in Michigan, and they had just received an RCPP, and then a partner with Grand Traverse was Sam Plotkin out of Leelanau Conservancy, also in Michigan. So I don't know if some of you guys saw that or not, but I have sort of just modified the presentation that we gave at Rally. It was supposed to be, you know, an overview of the program and some of the, you know, the NRCS legislative program side, and then, you know, a couple of case studies about, you know, how it worked for us, what the application process looked like, how we developed the application, why we were interested in applying for RCPP, and then, you know, sort of how it's going since we did get the funding allocated and how it's been. So it's pretty much, that's kind of the model I'm going to follow for this presentation as well. The first few slides here are actually Jerome's slides from NRCS. He had several more, but I just pulled out a few that I thought captured what he, you know, what the NRCS was trying to convey in their portion of the presentation, and don't hold me accountable for the specifics of the NRCS side of things. I just did think it would be helpful to give their overview and present their relevant slides. So I'm going to go ahead and start moving this forward if I can. Let's see. Okay, I think I clicked that. So, you know, as far as the RCPP vision from the NRCS side, and again, please, you know, consult with your local or state NRCS office on this. But, you know, I think really what their goal is to try to create a new model for conservation that puts more focus and control in, you know, the local land trust or local watershed groups' hands, and try to, you know, piggyback on existing initiatives that are happening in a region, and allow the land trust or whoever the partners are to really identify the key concerns, the resource concerns in the area, and then try to put a program together that addresses those concerns in an effective way you know, and leverage all the partnerships that exist in an area that NRCS might not otherwise be able to leverage. You know, they focus on innovation and trying to come up with new ways of increasing the pace and effectiveness of conservation. And again, they really like the idea of creating these larger partner groups that can be effective in sort of using existing networks to reach new landowners and to build on existing projects with current landowners. So their available funding, you know, is $100 million a year to RCPP. They have 4 program areas, programs that they utilize: the conservation ASAP, CSP, EQIP, and then Healthy Forest was the other one. You know, one question that will come up is which funding pool to apply for. You can see on this slide the breakdown of where the money goes: 25% to state, 40% to national, and 35% to critical conservation areas. I mean, I can say that we applied in our state pool because our project was all within our state of Montana boundaries. I think if you cross state boundaries, you get into the national pool. And then there's also critical conservation areas that have been identified. There are a couple in Montana, and I believe there's probably some in Oregon as well. But that's something to work with your state office on, I think, is trying to understand which pool to apply to. Sorry, I'm having a hard time advancing my slides here. Okay. So again, this is just a graphic that shows the covered programs. Our focus for our project was on the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program and on the EQIP program, which we were calling, you know, stewardship practices, you know, stream restoration, improved irrigation, grazing plans, things like that. So we focused on easements and stewardship, and that really aligned with our, you know, our current setup as an organization. That's pretty much what we focus on. We tried actually, I think, originally to get some money through the Healthy Forest Reserves, which isn't really available in Montana typically, at least in our region it hasn't been. And we had some projects that were in forested areas. As we went through the process, we got the message from NRCS that there wasn't really funds available through forest reserves. So we just focused on ASAP and EQIP. But technically speaking, you can apply to all 4 programs through RCPP. And then just some unique things to RCPP. You can adjust the terms. That's probably one of the nicest things about RCPP is that you can, in your application, you know, ask to adjust some of the terms. We actually didn't, but I know some other groups have asked to adjust like the adjusted gross income limits, and you can request that those be, you know, not enforced for the purposes of the RCPP. And there's other like probably soils requirements and things like that. There's a way to, you know, justify a project to change some of those terms, which is pretty nice because you can't do that otherwise through, you know, ASAP or EQIP. So one slide I just wanted to put up there, which was in the rally presentation. You know, RCPP is a new program that came out of the 2014 Farm Bill. And this is, on the right there is Glenn Schoen, who I co-presented with, and in the middle is Senator Debbie Stabenow out of Michigan, who helped to write the 2014 Farm Bill. And I just put this up there because I'm sure, as most of you are aware, the Farm Bill is in the early stages of being rewritten. And from what I'm hearing and what others have heard, I think RCPP will continue to be a part of the program. It's a new direction for NRCS that I think they are seeing success with. And so it's kind of an interesting time where, you know, these projects are sort of just getting off the ground, and it's already time to rewrite the Farm Bill. And, you know, I'm sure you guys have all been following the ASAP rule And so, you know, I just wanted to put that out there, that it is sort of a time of transition. I think the expectation is for RCPP to continue to be part of it, but certainly good to reach out to your local representatives and provide input about what that farm bill should look like. So jumping into our project, you know, the first question that we got, you know, is how do land trusts play a role, and why would land trusts be a good, you know, partner on an RCPP project? And, you know, the Gallatin Valley Land Trust, we were the lead partner on our application. We had 17 other partner groups on the application. You know, from a land trust perspective, we think that land trusts could be strong lead partners because, you know, at least in our area, we have strong connections with landowners and agricultural producers already. You know, we've been in, our organization started about 26 years ago. We have 100 easements. You know, we have these strong relationships with the local conservation district, the local watershed group, Trout Unlimited, you know, groups who are active in the area and connections to these landowners. You know, and I think NRCS is looking for partners on this who have those connections and are creating new ways to get the conservation dollars on the ground, and not only on the ground, but in the right places as well. And so connecting to existing initiatives is key to this. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a second here. I think the other part for Land Trust too is that, you know, we had a history with NRCS programs. GVLT holds 19 easements that have utilized funding through FRPP or ACEP programs. So we had a good track record of accomplishing projects successfully, you know, following through, getting projects off the ground and closing projects and getting money on the ground. So I think that played strongly into our application. We also have a local county bond, that was two actually, that were passed to fund easement acquisitions in the Gallatin Valley. And so we had you know, a commitment from the residents of Gallatin County through, you know, financial commitment from the residents of Gallatin County, and an investment from them in local conservation initiatives, specifically conservation easements. So that goes a long way in, you know, showing how NRCS dollars will be leveraged and showing local support for conservation and conservation easements. And I think both of those played strongly in our application. So there's a nice shot of the East Gallatin River there and some of the ag lands in the valley. So, you know, just sort of to encapsulate our project, we call it the Gallatin Valley. Technically, it's the lower Gallatin Basin. Our regional that we defined for RCPP, our geographic region was based on, you know, a hydrologic code, so a HUC code, the lower Gallatin Basin. We're in an area of rapid development. There's a lot of growth. Gallatin County has been the fastest growing county in Montana for about 2 decades. Bozeman itself is a fast growing part of the state, the fastest growing city in the state. And so, you know, we're faced with a lot of changing times, a lot of land conversion. Gallatin Valley also has really rich agricultural soils and a long history of agriculture here in the valley. It's something people value highly. We have a lot of, you know, old farm families that are around that still hold large agricultural properties. But in these changing times, you know, land's getting converted to non-agricultural uses. In addition, we have, you know, water quality. A water quality study was completed about 2 years ago by the local watershed group that identified impaired streams in the Gallatin Valley. And so we were able to utilize their findings to identify priority areas within the Gallatin Valley that would both help to protect the agricultural lands as well as to help improve water quality practices and water quality in the waterways. We're also part of the Missouri River headwaters. The 3 rivers come together in Gallatin County to form the Missouri River. So there was a nice, we sort of framed some of our application and proposal was framed around the importance of, the headwaters of the Missouri River and how those, some of those form in Gallatin County. So it's, putting together the application, our two primary objectives were soil health and water quality, and those aligned with the NRCS state objectives. I think that's pretty key to make sure your project is aligning with the primary resource concerns of the NRCS, and ours did. So to meet those objectives, we were going to use agricultural land easements for conservation easement projects to protect prime soils, and we put an emphasis on prime soil lands that were on or close to waterways, and we tied those together. And then we also had, focus on equip projects that would improve stewardship practices, and we made an argument that we thought those would be most effective and efficient on easement properties if possible, because that easement properties won't get converted to subdivisions or any other sort of development. The landowners had already made the investment to maintain the agricultural lands, and so it made sense from a long-term perspective to continue to invest in those lands at a stewardship level as well. So we prioritized projects that, again, were close to impaired streams, that had productive soils, that were close to conserved lands, and also we put some special emphasis on species of concern and habitat improvements to, build the wildlife component of these projects as well. So outcomes so far, I'm jumping ahead to sort of outcomes, and I'm going to run back through some nuts and bolts of the application. We received a $3.8 million allocation in 2015. About $3 million of that was through ASAP-AL, so for easements, and then about $800,000 was for equip projects. Since then, we've closed one AL project through RCPP. We have another one that's going to close in another few months, and we're putting together 3 new projects right now that will be submitted this spring. Also, matching easements within your geographic area count as contributions toward your RCPP proposal. We have 8 other easements that have closed within our geographic boundary that count towards the partner contribution component of the RCPP proposal. I'm sure we'll get questions about that. In equip, there's 2 projects funded so far. GVLC helped to have 15 landowners submit applications in that first year. We have a great relationship with our local office at NRCS, and balancing the number of applications with their ability to process them is important. And so that's why we've had 15 projects that are lined up to go, and only 2 have been funded so far. But they were really impressed with the amount of projects we brought to the table, and they're doing a great job of leveraging other pools of money they have to make the RCPP dollars go as far as possible, and they've been really great to work with on that. So that's been a key part to our success. Partner contributions, 1,600 contacts. That includes meetings, workshops, landowner one-on-one conversations, as well as emails to lists of people who are landowners. And we had $7 million in partner contributions in this last fiscal year. A lot of that was property value through conservation easements, which can count as your partner contribution. There's also a requirement for a cash match as well, and we can get into that a little bit more. So, this slide's kind of about why we thought RCPP made sense for us. Our state pool here in Montana, the ASAP-AL state pool, is fairly competitive, very competitive, and I think just becoming more so, which is great. It means we are getting a lot of projects, completed here, but when you go through the process of putting a project together and communicating with the landowner, as I'm sure most of you know, it's hard to, if you don't have, there's no certainty in getting the funds allocated to that project. And it's certainly a lot of work to get AL application put together to the point of just applying. There's a lot of work that has to be done. And, it's without the certainty of getting funded, you go through all that work, you have the landowner engaged, you have momentum behind the project, and then if you're not funded, it slows everything down and kills the project in a lot of scenarios, and you have to wait a whole nother year to, reapply, and values have changed, and landowners have, things change. So for us, because of that competition, we saw RCPP as an opportunity to have a separated pool of funds available in the Gallatin Valley that we could have confidence in being able to get projects put together to the point of an application and be, pretty certain that we'd have the federal dollars available to, complete the project as we had it proposed. And that made a huge difference in reaching out and, having our relationships with these landowners, having the confidence to know that there was this separated pool of dollars that were available just for projects in the Gallatin Valley. So we could say with a lot more certainty that, this is what the project's going to look like, and we're 90% sure we can get it funded in this time frame. And that goes a long way to making the project move, as well as just building confidence within the landowner. It also reduced competition across the state. I mean, we were, GVLT was submitting a couple, 2 or 3 AL applications a year, as well as probably 4 or 5 other land trusts across the state. And so by having RCPP, I think it opened up funding for other land trusts as well a little bit. So it kind of works well on a state level. The other great thing about RCPP is that we have this locally driven evaluation criteria. So in addition to the ranking criteria that comes from the national office, we have another set from the state office, and then we were able to create our own set of criteria for our RCPP geographic area, and that's where we prioritize properties that are close to impaired streams, close to other conserved properties. We gave extra points for, building on large blocks of land, and we also gave extra points for quality soils and species of concern as well. So it was nice to, help add control to which projects rose to the top. So just getting into what the proposal looked like, geographic area is one of the first things we thought about. It made sense for us to do the lower part of our watershed, the lower Gallatin Basin. It was an area we were comfortable with. It made sense geographically. We had a watershed restoration plan that had been done on that exact area, so we could tie into that. And all of it's located within Gallatin County, and we had our open lands program with matching funds that were available for easements. So all those things were influenced us to create the Gallatin Valley or Lower Gallatin Basin as our geographic area. As far as goals and objectives, we set out to, we set a certain number of easement projects and acres, and we also set a certain number of equip projects and acres associated with that. We had 17 partner organizations ranging from the Conservation District to the agricultural irrigators to Trout Unlimited to Audubon, and also our Greater Gallatin Watershed Council as well. So it was we have good partnerships with them already, and it was just pulling them together around one project was really effective. We were in the funding pool with that state funding pool, and again, the programs we looked at, ASAP and EQUIP. In innovation and solutions, basically we tied it into, the restoration plan, the watershed restoration plan that existed, and targeting properties that were close to impaired streams and close to other easements as a way to be more effective and strategic in our conservation work here in the Gallatin Valley. And so this is a map just to give you the visual. The red line is our geographic area. Again, that's the lower Gallatin Basin. We identified six like waterways. The two in red, Camp Creek and East Gallatin, were our primary focus areas, and then we had 4 other creeks in purple that had been identified in this watershed plan as impaired, and so our focus was to help protect soil health and water quality on those waterways. So this is probably where a lot of you are now if you're looking at submitting applications. There was the pre-proposal, and then you get invited back for a full proposal. I honestly don't know if that's changed since the first round, but the full proposal was quite a bit more, there's a lot more to putting together the full proposal. We were in close contact with the NRCS state office and the local office along the way, and I think that was really helpful to help us align with their goals and objectives for the program. And then once the application was approved and we got selected, our proposal got selected for funding, there was a pretty long period of getting our MOU first, which was the first step in having those funds allocated to our RCPP project. The MOU spelled out the amount of dollars and the programs that those dollars were coming from. And then there was the cooperative agreement was sort of the second step in that, that showed the funds, how the funds would be exchanged between the entities and NRCS. And those processes took several months. I think probably because it was the first round of RCPP, it took probably a little longer than it does now. But I think going into it, it helps to know that if you have projects that are ready to go and you're just in this early stage of the process, you could either go through the state pool or just make your landowners aware that the process is it's going to take some time. This gets a little bit into how to put your proposal together and the difference between financial assistance and technical assistance, which was important to understand as we put together our proposal. Financial assistance, FA, refers to cash payments to landowners. So this would be the real, cash match to any of your easement projects or equip projects. Technical assistance, that is where, there is, funding available to help with the technical assistance of putting a project together, which could include conservation planning, technical consultation on, the stewardship side of things. Does not include education or outreach. And then the other nice part about RCPP is that you can set your own timelines for the RCPP process, so they don't have to be the same as the state AL timeline, which is nice. And actually, our state office encouraged us to offset it from that so that they weren't overwhelmed. But it allows you to create your own deadlines for AL or equip applications to come in through RCPP, and you're not tied to those national deadlines, which can be really helpful. And then, getting the project execution is really similar to any other projects you run through, like ASAP. The difference is you have set your own deadlines, you have some different criteria, but the application process for an easement project is almost identical to what you do if you were just applying through the state pool. It's the same forms. You just check off RCPP instead of ASAP, and it puts it in a different pool. But your landowners still have to be registered through FSA. They have to be compliant with highly erodible lands. They have to have all their documentation in place. The appraisal process is the same. It's just that you are applying to a separated pool of funds that exist for your project area. And then, reporting, there's an annual or biannual report just to show the work you've done, and also a way to capture your partner innovation, your partner contributions as well. So lessons learned, partnerships, collaboration. We focused on water and soils. Showing creativity. We emphasized permanence and the investment of putting dollars on conserved lands that made sense, that weren't going to get converted to residential subdivisions in the near future. We went out and we got 17 partners. I think that helped. Contributions versus match, that was a key question we had going into it, and probably I'm sure some of you have questions about that. From our perspective, the way we thought about it was contributions were any sort of project that was happening in your geographic area that contributed to your key resource concerns, so soil health and water quality for us. Match refers to your typical match, like you'd need to bring to any sort of ASAP or equip project. The cash match, that's local dollars that go towards the project. Lessons learned, again, timelines are long. It doesn't make the process go a whole lot faster, but again, having the certainty of dollars is made it worth it for us, and has helped us to develop more projects. Be prepared, and stay connected. Again, partnership, communication with the state and local NRCS office has been key to both project development and then project implementation since we were awarded the funds. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm sure there's probably lots of questions. Sorry if I went a little over, but happy to answer them now or at the end, whatever makes the most sense.
Thanks so much, Brendan. That was fantastic. We have a few minutes for questions, specifically about Brendan's presentation, and we'll open it up. Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, Michael Pope, we're going to unmute you for your question. Go ahead. Do you want to try that again, Michael? We can't hear you. It doesn't sound like we can hear you, but you can type in your question in the little box and we can read it out loud. This is Michael Pope, Executive Director of Greenbelt Land Trust. Oh, while Michael's typing in, I'm going to call on Mark Summer. And you should be unmuted. Yeah, we can hear you, Mark. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Mark Summer with the Conservation Fund. You'd mentioned contribution versus match. Is there a cash match, hard requirement, a certain percent or something like that?
Yeah, so you have to have match at, I think it's like a 1-to-1. I mean, the way I think about match is, at a project level, for an ASAP project, if you are applying for an ASAP project, you have to bring at least 50% of what the NRCS brings to a project. And so that is the same match requirement for an RCPP project. You would still need to bring 50% of the cash match for any sort of conservation easement project, similar to the state pool. For us, it's the same for equip, in that the landowner is required to bring a certain percentage of the cost of the project, and that cash match would be the same through RCPP.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. I'm going to read. Michael Pope with Greenbelt Land Trust asked, how far back can you go for match?
Sorry, I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago when we put this together. I don't think you can go back in time on match. I think it is going forward from, I think when you sign the contract is when your match, you can start adding up your match and your partner contributions.
Great, that's all. And we'll have Lauren maybe address those questions too at the end. But now I'm going to hand the presentation over to Derek Johnson with the Nature Conservancy Oregon and Julia Lakes with Wallowa Land Trust to talk about their RCPP.
All right. Hi, everybody. Mike Running is going to hand me a magical remote to change the slides. The right button? All right, cool. All right, hey, this is Derek with the Nature Conservancy in Oregon, and we've got just a few slides here. We're going to kind of cut to the chase since Brendan did such a great job of doing the nuts and bolts of the program and a lot of background and overview of the program that Lauren, I think, will probably reinforce a little bit. And Julie's on the phone I mean, I love your office, Kelly, but Julie's on the phone in a much prettier place than we are, somewhere staring at something like that. I don't know if it's that sunny out there today, but
well, I'm
hey,
currently
Julie.
looking at a wall, but outside it's snowing, so.
Well, if you went outside, you'd see pretty scenery in beautiful Wallowa County. So, Julie, just chime in whenever I screw something up or you want to get your 2 cents in, okay? All right, so let's give everybody just a quick overview of what the area we're talking about, so you have a little bit of context. So people in Oregon might be a little bit more familiar, but we're in the far northeastern corner, literally, of the state here, and all this, whitish, tannish land, sandwiched between all the green stuff on the map, is almost all exclusively. There's a couple towns in there, but it's almost exclusively privately owned working ranch and farmland, sandwiched between the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest to the south, which has Eagle Cap Wilderness, and Hell's Canyon National Recreation Area, North America's deepest canyon, off to the east. So as you can imagine, there's an incredible amount of natural biological diversity out here, and this private landscape is really important both as a bridge between all that public land, but also really important economically in the community. I think the agriculture sector contributes something like 30–35% to the total economy in Wallowa County, and a lot of that does come from these lands that we're looking at here. So one of the things you have to do in RCPP is you have to map out or designate a project area, and it can be as big and as specific as you want it to be. So we tried to draw in a little bit rather than just all those private lands. We knew that the Nature Conservancy, specifically one of the key partners, is focused on the Zumal Prairie, which is a big native grassland, and the Land Trust and our other partner we'll talk about are mainly focused down in the valley floor. I've got 2 main river systems, the Lostine River and the Wallowa River, 3 endangered fish, lots of other really cool critters. It's where a lot of the irrigated ground, farm ground is located, and so it's kind of cool in a way that the Land Trust is focused in one part of the geography, Nature Conservancy is focused in a different part of the geography, and so this RCPP project allowed us, and Wallowa Resources, the other partner, allowed us to kind of marry and truly integrate those geographies and the resource concerns that we're working on. So that's how we did that. Barely touched that. And so just a quick overview on the specifics of our RCPP project. Thanks, Brendan, for kind of a little tutorial on the different funding pools and things like that. We went after the national pool, and we did that instead of the state or the critical conservation area one, which this would have qualified for the Columbia River, Columbia Basin CCA, really at the behest and guidance of our local NRCS district conservationist. And I will say this later again, but it really can't be overemphasized, at least for us in Oregon, working with your local NRCS staff, in addition to the state office, and in Oregon we have these weird things called basin team leaders as well. You can't really over-communicate and over-partner with NRCS on this. And so, we would just make that point, that it really starts in conversations with, especially your local NRCS staff. If they're not supportive, or if you're not aligned with what they're already working on, or being synergistic with the conservation outcomes they're trying to achieve, you really have no shot. You need support at the local level, and you absolutely need, I mean, literally a letter from the state conservationists, at least for the national pool, at the state level. So get in early. I mean, April's coming fast already, but so if you haven't and you're thinking about this, just go sit down with them and talk to them about how this works and what their priorities are if you don't know already, and stuff you're working on, and try to find that synergistic marriage and how to do something that's going to benefit everybody. So we went after the national pool in part because our local NRCS person is so doggone good at drumming up money that he already had an existing state RCPP project funded, and I think he was waiting on a yes from the CCA for a different project in Wallowa County. And I don't think there's a hard rule about this, but he thought, well, you might get blackballed a little bit if you're going after the same general pool. So if you're going to do this, why don't you think about the national pool? So we said, okay, great. So we went after the national pool, and thankfully we were successful. So that strategy seemed to pay off. So we did the opposite of Brendan. We did 3 project partners instead of 17. And that's us, the Land Trust, and then Wallowa Resources, which is a spin-off of Sustainable Northwest. For those in Oregon who know that group, they focus on the intersection between natural resource management and the local economy. They don't own or manage any land, but they are working with producers in lots of different ways, and there was a great opportunity to support some of the work that they're doing, especially down in the same areas that the Land Trust is working on. So we had 3 formal project partners. We did do outreach to the Soil Monster Conservation District. We did outreach and talked a lot with other groups like the Freshwater Trust, the Nez Perce Tribe. They almost were a formal partner, and then we decided for various reasons that probably didn't make the most sense. So we tried to talk about their work in sort of a bigger, smaller case P partnership sort of way in the proposal. But in terms of who's on the hook to do stuff, it's just these 3 partners right here. And so I guess I would make that point to say that there's no magic number of partners that we ever heard or saw that you need to have in order to cross some magic threshold with NRCS. It really depends on the total story and outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So I think it's cool that Brendan has 17 and we have 3, so you can see different success stories in terms of the volume of partners that were involved. Ours is a similar dollar amount to Brendan's. It was $3.2 million that we were awarded. I think I might have this wrong. Laura can correct me later, but I think the max you can get in the national was, or that I was operating under at the time, was $10 million. Again, we were sort of coached by NRCS that you might not want to try to max that out. Go for something maybe closer in the 5 range. Seems to be a sweet spot based on the 2 years of funding that they had dispersed across the country. So that was great coaching and great guidance from NRCS. And very similar to the Montana project, we focused all that money in 2 program areas, the ALE, for permanent protection, and for EQIP. And there's some overlap on the acreages there of where we're putting those projects. And then we also, of course, got some technical assistance funds for all the partners to actually, help implement some of that work. We didn't do conservation stewardship program because again, our local NRCS folks are really good, and pretty much everybody in Wallowa County who can go in the CSP is already in CSP. So while that might sound not great, it's actually great because, to Brennan's point, a big emphasis we made in this project was sort of doubling down and securing the conservation investments that have been made and that are planned to be made in these particular geographies. And I personally was a little worried that NRCS, being new to the easement world in Wallowa County, there's 2 existing easements in the entire county, at least I know of, and they're both held by the Land Trust. So it's a really new phenomenon, and NRCS, until last year, really wasn't even hearing any demands really from landowners for their programs, and so we've been trying to really gin this up, very different than the maturity of the program in Montana. So I was nervous that, we're going to come in and ask for all this easement money, and they're not going to like that, but it was quite the opposite. They said, oh yeah, well that helps make sure our money that we put on the ground and will continue to put on the ground, and other partners' money on the ground is going to be secured for the future. So that's a great role that Land Trust can play in this. And then on the resource priority, you have to pick what resource concerns you're trying to address through your RCPP project. There's a menu of them. There's a menu at the national level, there's a menu at the state level, and there should be a menu at the local level. It's really nice if that menu is pretty similar in those three places, and you can, hone in on one that gets you that bigger bang for the buck. They make you pick one. It's literally a drop-down menu in the application, but you can sort of put in secondaries, but you got to pick a primary. So we picked soil health, probably the same reason Brendan did. It's a big deal. It was the highest priority for local, state, and national. I don't know if they actually rank them, but it was at least high on the list. It was one of the first bullet points listed. But the cool thing is that you can't really address soil health at all without also having some benefits to things like water quality, water quantity, and of course with the easements we're protecting working ag land. So you get a chance to talk about those other multiple benefits. So to the question of why did we want to do RCPP, why now, very similar I think to what Brendan articulated, so I'll go through these kind of quick. The Nature Conservancy in Wallowa County had applied in 2015 for a single AL project, just the good old-fashioned way, not RCPP, and we were successful, which is great. But through that process and working with the land trust, we knew that we had landowners interested in the county, and we could see conflict coming in terms of competition for limited dollars. And so we decided, well, it probably makes more sense to team up together and rake in a bigger pool of money if we can. And to have that certainty that we've got X amount to spend on these sorts of projects over a 5-year time period, again, similar to what Brendan was saying, rather than bite your fingernails and hopefully get stuff through on a year-to-year basis. So, it's kind of like going to Costco and buying those giant peanut butter jars that are going to last you a little while, as opposed to getting those little niche ones at New Seasons that I eat in about 2 days and have to go back to New Seasons. So we thought that made a lot of sense, and I think it's going to pay off for us in that way. We also were seeing much more demand from landowners, much more interest in landowners, so we knew we had opportunities there. And then the whole beauty of this is that we now have an opportunity, a real galvanizing project for these three partners to work on together. We've worked together in sort of softer sort of ways in the county, but we've never had like really a single project where we have shared outcomes, right? Shared deliverables, shared skin in the game, and I think that's going to, even after the RCPP, I think it's just going to benefit all of us in our collective efforts there and our partnership together. So that's a good thing. In addition to the other partners that aren't formal partners but are doing a lot of work that adds to the value of this particular project. And then of course, there's existing stuff going on. You want to make sure you do this, is understand what NRCS's priorities are, what their investments are, other partners. You want to get as much alignment and synergy as you possibly can. It's going to be more successful that way with conservation actions on the ground that are already happening. We already tested the AL waters a little bit, so we kind of knew that process. That goes true for Wallowa Land Trust as well. So we had some confidence there. We understood what we were getting into, I think was very helpful. And then quite frankly, one of the motivators, at least for us at the Nature Conservancy, is we knew that there were a couple of landowners that were really high priority landowners that we wanted to do easements with that were going to probably be beyond the caps of the adjusted gross income limitation that is set in the Farm Bill or set for particular programs in the Farm Bill. If you apply through the regular AL, there is no way currently to get a waiver for these AGI limits. The only way to get a waiver is, I don't know why this is, but the only way to get a waiver is to get it funded through an RCPP. You're not guaranteed the waiver, but you can ask for the waiver, and as I understand it anyway, we haven't gone there yet, but as I understand it, the likelihood is good that you can get that waiver approved. So that was another motivating factor. It wasn't a driving factor, but it sure was something that we needed to think about. So a few things to consider as you're thinking about this and putting your project together. Again, just the importance of communication with NRCS, especially at the local office, but a little bit at the state office as well, and to the extent you've got sort of a middle tier. Just rely on your local person the most and follow their guidance on who needs to know what and who can help the proposal to be built the most effective way. If you don't have, like I said earlier, if you don't have NRCS support, you're dead in the water. And to, building on that, know the local NRCS priorities. Build off of that. It's going to be very challenging, I think, if their priorities are, soil health and water quality, and your thing is all about something else, whatever that, air quality or EQIP money for related to climate resiliency or something like that. I mean, those all things are related, but I think it's really, really beneficial to be talking the same language and not trying to oversell a connection. Pick your pool accordingly. I think Brendan made that point very well. And then, start as early as you can thinking about this, which is great. Lauren's going to talk a little bit about the application. Kind of get your brain into it. We started talking to NRCS and just brainstorming about this, I think, a good 8 months. We didn't know, the request for proposal wasn't even out yet. Just to alert NRCS that we were thinking about this, and does this even make sense, and what should we be going off and thinking about together as a partnership to see if there's a there there. So I just really emphasize that. And I said this already, but you have to aim at one primary resource concern, but you want to try to make the case that you're going to have multiple benefits with the project. And early on, I think it's important to pick a lead partner, because you got to have that for the proposal, and if it gets funded, who's on the hot seat. But even just to build the proposal, which isn't, I didn't compare to other proposals. I mean, I thought this was easier than OWEB, for those of you out there who know OWEB. That's just my personal experience. But you still need to project manage that thing. So think about this in a project management light. Who's on first and what the deliverables are, and have regular meetings to build the proposal. Maybe we signed out questions. There's 10 questions in the pre-proposal. Julia's going to take these 3. TNC's going to take these 2. We're all going to read each other's, but have a process to get that thing done, so you're not scrambling with a week to go, which somehow still happens anyway. I think this is one of my last slides, and just things that we learned through the process. So I think it was someone's question about the match, and Lauren's probably scratching the table. They don't ever use the word match in RCPP. I think it's a real technical thing, but it's all called financial contribution. And I'm not a grant specialist to know exactly what the legal difference is there, but anytime you see the word match here, just know that they call it financial contribution, and that's how you will talk about it throughout your proposal. But you definitely want to aim for that 1-to-1 or 50-50 match or better. There is no firm commitment. It never says anywhere in the whole thing, in the whole proposal, or the request for proposal, that you have to meet a certain percentage. But it does say, I don't know if it spells out 1-to-1, but I think it does. The closer you get to that, the much more competitive you're going to be. I think ours in Wallowa County was not quite there. I think it was like 46% or something like that. So we have Exhibit A here that you can get something funded if it doesn't quite meet 1-to-1, but we tried it really hard, and that was probably one of the biggest challenges of our proposal, was really engineering the math a little bit to try to get to that 1-to-1 goal. And a part of what makes that challenging is this next bullet point, that NRCS requires, or at least we did in Oregon, I don't know if this is true across the whole country, that they need 20, and it's fair because they got to implement this stuff, 20% on top of your total project costs for the project, for their own technical assistance. You will never see that money. That money goes to NRCS to do the good work that they need to do. So this is a way for them to get their funding into the state to implement conservation work, and tied to this proposal and probably other work on top of that. So you need to put that in there, and it does count towards that financial contribution, that 1-to-1 that you need to come up with, right? So you're going to have to you got to find a way to get there. And I think Brendan may have been way more creative than we were, being able to pull in sort of other projects, other work to count towards that. Made that, well, no, that's about how firm do you have to be at the time of pre-proposal for match or for financial contribution. You don't at the time of pre-proposal. At the time of full proposal, if you're invited to come back, you have to write a letter Each formal partner that's listed in the proposal does have to write a letter saying we're going to provide, X amount of financial contribution to this project. You don't have to produce any bank statements. You don't have to produce any, proof that the money's in the bank, but you do have to go on record that you're going to pony up. One of the challenges I thought through the process is, and this goes to lessons learned, I think I do have one more slide on lessons learned, is we kind of got into this thinking, oh, you got to be really specific about the projects you're going to do. What properties are going to put easements on? Where's the EQIP money going to go? Are those landowners, aware and interested in having EQIP? How much ecological benefit are we going to get? And how do we put measurable goals and all that stuff? What are the costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And you do need to do some of that. We have acreage. You got to tell the story. What's this all going to achieve, right? That's what we're all after. That's what NRCS is after. But what's interesting is think about this as sort of like a block grant. You're kind of pulling in this money that's sort of parked and saved for your project. But you still then have to go out and specifically apply for those dollars. We're still going to have to go out for every single easement we want to do and go through the ALE process, as Brendan said, and still make sure that the land is eligible, the landowner is eligible. They have to review the appraisals. They got to review your easement. All the stuff you normally would do if you never knew RCPP existed. You still got to do it, but you at least know the money is there, right? And then there's flexibility if things don't work out. I mean, you don't want to use that to be loosey-goosey with it, but you don't also need to freak out, is what the lesson I learned. If a landowner changes their mind, a deal can't happen, or it doesn't happen in the fiscal year that you thought it would, it happens a year later. These are 5-year RCPP projects for 5 years. So you're trying to look in your crystal ball for 5 years. That's hard to do. Just know that at least our experience is that there is some flexibility. We kind of got talked off the ledge there by NRCS staff that we didn't need to freak out too much, but we do need to say we do think it's going to be these projects which would then lead to these outcomes. And you do not put specific landowner names down. You don't identify specific parcels. We actually started with that with local NRCS staff. It's like, oh, no. Just give me a project area, think about what the total impact's going to be, and then anybody can apply for this money, even though we have specific landowners in mind. If somebody else comes in or goes to the land trust and says, I really want to do this, well, NRCS, assuming the land trust wants to work with them, but like on an EQIP contract, for example, which land trusts have nothing to do with, the NRCS has to think about that. I mean, they can't say no to somebody just because we built this RCPP thing. They're getting money for specific resource outcomes, and if a landowner comes in who's eligible and all that, and the project they want to do achieves those outcomes, they can do it. So it's just interesting. It's a little bit of apple-orange from the front end to the back end, or at least that was our experience with it. And then the last point here on things to know is there's no indirects allowed, right? So you can't recover, at least under the sort of the specific category of indirect cost recovery, you can't recover a certain percent to administer the grant, right? To pay your staff time to administer the grant, if you ask for it that way. I think, and Lauren can step in later and correct me here, I think you can ask for it if you can show it as technical assistance for your organization. TNC is totally weird, and we have these goofy rules, so we can't do that for some reason. Don't ask me why, but the administration of this, quite frankly, seems pretty low because you're parking money, and EQIP money especially. We don't ever see it. That money just sits there, and the landowner works directly with the NRCS, right? So it never runs through, in our case, lead partner here at TNC, it never runs through our books. We're not sitting on money and then subawarding it out. And same thing with the ALE money. We're not going to take all this money in and then subaward it out to the land trust. So whatever admin work, there's going to be some reporting and that kind of stuff, but in terms of the bulk of the admin work, I think is going to be for the ALE projects that we were going to do anyway. So, well, at least that's how I sold it to my organization, that we were going to get anyway. So I hope that's true, Lauren. We'll find out. All right, last slide with any kind of words on it. What happened there? Just a couple other things that we learned. Hold on a minute. I don't know what happened to my first few words, it should say engage with NRCS. Oh, wait, that's not what it says. Sorry, guys. Hold on a minute.
It should say still have to apply through specific program. Ale,
Equip, etc. Yeah. Yeah. So we made that point already. You still got to go through the process even once the money is parked. We were coached to really try to backload the deliverables. You know, we're ready to go. Got a couple landowners are really excited. So we started putting in, hey, we'll get the sale done in 2017. And the local NRCS said, no, 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 you won't. You won't do that at all. Because, it takes quite a while to several months to sign the cooperative agreement. Maybe there's ways to work through that that I don't know about yet, but it does take some time to get that cooperative agreement signed, which sort of then releases the money or allows the money to flow. And then there's just sort of all this back-end work that needs to be done. The local NRCS staff, they need to make sure that they've got a process to rank criteria, a process to rank the applications if they don't have one. To the extent they do have one, but it's not well engineered or put together to fund these sorts of projects. You got to work through a process with the local working committee to change it. They meet every year, at least once a year to do that. So there's just some sort of building the stage kind of stuff that you got to do. So that's just a bit of advice that we got. And I just can't overemphasize, at least for us, how helpful NRCS was in thinking about how to talk about the proposal. They didn't go so far as to read it and then say, oh, you should change this and change that. That's out of bounds. But you can sort of describe to them how you're thinking about it, and does it make sense to pull these things together or leave this off or pull this in? And they're just really helpful. They know that stuff. And especially Lauren, he reviewed the doggone thing. I don't know, he reviewed this one, but he reviewed a lot at the national level. And as I said earlier, there's flexibility to move funds around after the award, which we were kind of sweating when we were putting it together, but we learned that there's a little more flexibility there. So I think, well, that's my computer. I think that's all I wanted to say. So with that, I think we can take any questions.
Great. We have, well, my first question from one of your slides was, you said you tested the ale waters. Does that mean terminal gravity?
Absolutely. Local brew pub out there. It's where all the great decisions get made and then probably forgotten. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a serious question from Sarah Steele, and I think it's for both Derek, Julia, and Brendan. Do you ever make cold calls to landowners?
Julia, do you want to take that? And chime in, Julia. Sorry, I just kind of didn't take a breath there.
That's fine. Thank you, Derek. You did a great job. Sarah, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that offline. That is not necessarily something that our organization does, although we, maybe show landowners in a certain region that we're interested in working with them, but we don't tend to make cold calls. But I'd be happy to talk to you more about that offline.
Julia, can you give like a 30-minute quick description, 30 seconds to a quick minute description of that Century Farm project, that little outreach project you did that probably helped cultivate some contacts?
Oh, sure. So Kelly's referring to a project that Wallowa Land Trust did as a kind of young, smaller land trust in a rural community, where instead of going out and making cold calls about conservation easements, we actually went out and interviewed Century Farm families, so folks that have owned and operated farms or ranches in the area for over 100 years. So that was a way to do some outreach, get to know those families, talk to them about a land trust, and then put together a booklet about those farm families in our area, honoring their history and the work that they had done to get to where they are today. So, maybe that's something more for your outreach or development folks, but I think for us it was a great avenue to getting to know the ag community, and has certainly benefited us. I'd say in terms of this RCPP project, we just have more and more interest in ag easements in our area, and I think we hope that this RCPP project will be a great way to reach out to a lot of those folks and get projects done in a more timely manner. And like Derek said, now we have the big jar of peanut butter as opposed to all the little jars. So hopefully we can be more efficient. But one thing I did want to add in is just, I know that in Oregon, so many of us have never used these agricultural land easements with NRCS. I think we're all working really hard to try to do more working lands easements and try to access those funds while at the same time coming up with some state match. But I would encourage you, if you're not quite ready to dive in and try out RCPP, look at projects that you think would fit with NRCS over the next year or two. Can you apply for an ALE-funded easement? Because I think just having some experience with how NRCS works and the language associated with ALE and all of that will give you a good sense of whether or not it's even a good idea to apply for RCPP. That's all I've got.
Super. Any other questions from folks in the field? Okay, we don't see any hands. So with that, we've kind of set the table for you, Lauren, and we're going to let you walk folks through the application, the pre-proposal application, and maybe in the beginning, I don't know if it's in the front end, you want to address some of those overarching issues or while you're in it, but next presenting is Lauren Unruh, who's the Assistant State Conservationist here at Oregon NRCS. So
thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, go ahead.
You got me? All right. So like Kelly said, I am the Assistant State Con for programs here in Oregon, and as she pointed out earlier, I have worked with the RCPP National Selection Team for the past couple of years, so I kind of have a little bit of insider experience. So just want to build on and reinforce, boy, Brendan and Derek and Julia all have said some great stuff and really put a good foundation for, you know, what it takes and what RCPP, a successful RCPP project looks like. But it starts with this announcement for program funding, and we'll go through that. I just want to say a couple more things, reinforcing that the partners are in control with RCPP. Our Chief Weller, our former chief at this point, said that RCPP really puts partners in the driver's seat. They identify the project, the resource concerns, as you heard from both Derek and Brendan, and they ask for the funding for the project and ask for that amount, and then it's dedicated, just like Derek said. It's sitting in the bank waiting for the projects that you selected. And then going into Oregon, just, you know, Oregon is one of the leaders in the nation with RCPP, so if you're going to work here in Oregon, we've got good success. And as Derek and both Brendan in Montana said, it really starts at the local level with your relationship with the local district conservationist and the basin team leader. You know, you can call me, you can call Ron, but we're both going to refer back to that relationship, to have you start that relationship with the local district conservationist, and then you'll work with the basin team leader as necessary. But that relationship is so important, and it really builds for the future. And like they both said, that Ron, or the state conservationist, does have to support the proposal, the full proposal, and you have to provide a copy of the pre-proposal during the pre-proposal phase to the state conservationist. And then we, on the national team, we really look and see what the state conservationists, what their opinion is of the proposal, and that is a weighted category in our ranking. And so Ron's going to look to the district conservationist and the basin team leader as to what that you know, is the project good? Has the partner been working with the proposal and the district conservationist? Does everybody know what's going on, and is it a good project, and have you been working together? So getting into the APF here, one thing I want to note is we've had a little bit of trouble with folks getting a proposal that was the wrong year, or APF or for the wrong year, and so I just want to make sure that you look and make sure you have the right one, because they do change from year to year. Then opening up, oops, I thought that would work. Page 2. Let's see, Mike. Oh, there we go. So we're looking at the specific dates here. The pre-proposal application, April 21st is the due date, and prior to that, the national office is going to put on some webinars and help you walk through, really do a little more in depth of what I'm doing right now, but then there'll be question and answer periods, times for both you and the NRCS folks as you work through together on that. So pay attention to that, and then go to the national website, and they'll have the webinars posted. We'll get out, NRCS will get out information on when those webinars are. Then flipping a couple more pages here. Let's see if I can do, where's the down arrow, Mike? Let's go to page 3.
Hey, Lauren, why don't you just let me know when you want to scroll the PDF, and I can do it.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, I want to go to page 5. As I said, I'm going to flip through and kind of just highlight some things. So on page 5, both Derek and Brendan talked about the covered programs. There we are. And you can see the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program, the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, and the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program are really the covered programs. Those 5 programs, they're also donor programs, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But those are, and then in the critical conservation areas, you can call upon the watershed authorities, and those are the covered programs for RCPP. Then flipping over to page 7. I'll wait a little bit here as we get there. So slide down so number C is highlighted or visible. Just wanted to talk about the application and selection process. It's a 2-phase process. As you saw, the pre-proposal, and then you have to submit a pre-proposal, and that's evaluated with the national team, and then except for the state pool, if you submit it in the state pool, a state team will evaluate that, and then you'll be notified if your pre-proposal was selected so that you can submit a full proposal, and then the ranking and evaluation is again to those teams, and actually it goes a technical and programmatic team, of which I'm on for the national and the certified or critical conservation areas, is reviewed and ranked by the team, and then we actually make a recommendation to leadership, and then they review the proposals, both pre-proposals and the full proposals, and that's how they're selected by the national leadership team. Turning over one page to page 8. At the top is partner eligibility, and really the last bullet point is who can really be the lead partner. About any organization or entity with an established history of working with agricultural producers. So those folks that have conservation on the ground, or farmers or ranchers, any organization that has really worked with agricultural producers can be an eligible entity, and then you have all the other partners that can cooperate with them. Then land eligibility in B, it comes back to the covered programs, so you need to be familiar with the covered programs, and actually Appendix E in the back here that we'll get to Appendix D, I'm sorry, has a good definition of each program, but again, it comes back to your relationship with that local conservation district conservationist and what the programs require and how to be eligible, what's the entity and the participant eligibility, what the land eligibility is. So you need to understand that well. Then flipping over to page 9. Here's the dollars. So you can see, are we getting there? There we go. So you can see there's about $100 million that comes from RCPP, and then you have the donor programs, which are part of the covered program. So the EQIP, CSP, and ACEP actually have funding, and so there's 7% of those funds that are donated to RCPP, and then RCPP itself has $100 million that's dedicated, and so it ends up being about 252. So you ask, what about HFRP or the watershed authorities? You can apply for those. HFRPP and the watershed authorities, or PL 566, actually funding for those comes out of the RCPP funding itself. So there might have been a little question on, okay, I got a forestry project that and we're looking at a teeny species and the eligibility for HFRP. We want to do it, so that don't be hesitant to apply for HFRP funding if you have a good HFRP project. Just realize the funding will come out of the RCPP, which really does not influence you as the participant or applicant. It's just kind of an internal money shuffling thing. Also to note that CSP, although we have a dollar amount there, it's really allocated by acres, so you'll need to consider that. Then down at the bottom of this page, it talks about how the funding is split, and just want you to realize, so in the critical conservation areas, there's 35% of the national funding goes to the CCAs, and I'll explain a little bit about CCAs in a minute, and the national funding receives about 40%, and then the state fundings each get about 25, or they get 25% of the total funding. Flipping over to page 10, just right there you can see on the top line there, applicants must identify one specific fund pool in which to compete. And so as you're getting your application ready, you can only apply for one fund pool per application. If you have separate applications, you can apply to different fund pools with those applications. You don't have to put all your applications in one pool. So down at the bottom, I'll start with the national fund pool, and each fund pool has identified resource concerns, as Mike scrolls down for me. Right at the bottom. I'm skipping over that CCA stuff, but okay, it's at the top of the screen there. The National Fund Pool resource concerns, as you see there at the bottom of page 10 and the top of page 11, are those resource concerns. So you have to choose one of those resource concerns at least to apply for the national RCPP pool. And so those, you don't have to have a project that crosses state lines, so to speak, but you have to have one of these resource concerns, and a project area, the resource concern has to cross state lines. For example, here in Oregon, we have the Sage Grouse Initiative with RCPP, and that is a multi-state resource concern that talked about inadequate habitat for fish and wildlife. So that resource concern was identified for that specific for sage grouse, and it was multiple state. With CCA resource concerns, first of all, I'm going to back up a little bit and identify what a critical conservation area is. As you can see, there's 8 total critical conservation areas around the nation. And Kelly, were you going to have a map of that?
I do have a map after you go through this that I can pull up of the basins, but not specifically of the conservation areas. That will be, we'll send those out to folks.
Okay, so you can go on the website and look and see for Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. We're in the Columbia River Basin Critical Conservation Area, and it's identified the salmon habitat of the Columbia Basin River Basin watershed. So you'll see it covers these 3 states, and those are the resource concerns identified there: excess or insufficient water and drought, water quality degradation, and inadequate habitat for fish and wildlife. So you'll need to address one of those resource concerns if you want to apply in the CCA pool. Also, you have to be, at least 51% of your project has to be within the critical conservation area boundary. And then at the bottom is the state. It talks about the state resource concerns. And here in Oregon, we have identified forest health and biodiversity, which you can go to on this link. They didn't put all the state resource concerns in the national APF. But just so you know, for Oregon, it's forest health and biodiversity, water quality, water quantity, and wildlife habitat and degradation. If you notice right there, it talks about here in the first sentence, at least one of the resource concerns stated above, and you can use a national or CCA resource concern for applying in the state pool. So you don't necessarily have to use the state resource concerns listed. You can also use the national resource concerns. So I just wanted to highlight that a little bit. Okay, on our quick tour here, we're flipping over to page 13. And just so you know, I am skipping over alternative funding arrangements and some of the waiver parts. And if you're interested in that, you can definitely talk to your local district conservationist, or you can call me on some of those big picture questions. And they will, there's definitely information here in the APF on that. But I don't want to say you can't ask. Just looking at the pre-proposal application requirements, wanted to just highlight here the instructions are found in Appendix E, and we'll flip to that at the very end here. And really it comes back to the data entry tool, as it talks about in the very bottom there under data that you need to use the data entry tool. But working through this, I'm going to come back to, I think Derek really emphasized, have that relationship with your local district conservationist so that we can help you and walk through what's needed in the proposal. Derek, thank you very much for all those plugs. That was great. we're here to help. I'm sorry, I didn't say we're from the government and we're here to help, but we are, and we'll really help you work through how the requirements of the data entry tool. And like I said, the national office is going to have a webinar, so we really will work with you on that. Then flipping over to page 16. Here's where we get into how are we going to evaluate and rank the proposals. And it really comes back to these 4 pillars: participation, innovation, contribution, and solutions. And I just wanted to point out that as the ranking teams, we really look at these key questions that are here, and they're the basis for how your application is going to be ranked. So starting with participation, this really talks about, as it says, a diverse array of stakeholders there at the top, first paragraph, and program participants. Item number 1, or point number 1 there, talks about collaborating partners, and then they talk about encouraging participation of historically underserved producers. How are you addressing those historically underserved? And we do. That's a whole scoring question in itself. But we look at that, and then another important part in the ranking is what percentage of landowners do you expect to participate? And both Brendan and Derek talked about the history that you have working in that project area. You've got a base where maybe you've already tried some of the programs working with NRCS and implementing some of the programs. Who do you expect to participate? Do you have that participant list? Yeah, if you have the names, as Derek pointed out, that's very good. You don't have to be that far, but it does strengthen your project if you can say, we know of 60 applicants that are going to apply for this project that we're working on. It's very targeted, as that last bullet point is. That if you have a very targeted proposal with specific participants that you're expecting to apply, that's great. That's a very strong proposal for participation. Then in innovation, at the top of page 17, we're really looking for technical expertise and financial resources. Are they science-based solutions? RCPP is not a research project. Although we want to see innovation, it's got to be proven, science-based. And then if you're utilizing more than one program, as both Brendan and Derek they had multiple programs that they're coming in with, and that strengthens your proposal. Some of the other points in the numbers down there, is your conservation delivery kind of innovative, and are there promising new technologies? Are you very specifically addressing the primary resource concern based on recent scientific findings and lesson learned? And that's where that history of working with the local agricultural producers and the local NRCS really comes in. Then under contribution, here's where we've had a little controversy even in this conference. We are looking for contributions, and Derek's right, and we're not looking for, we hesitate in using match. There's really no given dollar match that has to be done. You can do a lot of match through assistance, but we do score these, and you can see, is there financial assistance? Are you putting dollars, just hard cash, towards the project? And then are you putting what percentage of technical assistance? And it's kind of interesting just scoring projects. You know, if one's heavy on one, if it's all technical assistance, we question, you know, if it's that great of a project, why is there no hard cash being donated toward this project? Why are the partners just saying, oh yeah, we'll come to a conference, or we'll help send out you know, do a public meetings or something and provide a lot of technical assistance, but if the financial assistance is also part of it. I want to jump back up to the last sentence there on the contribution of the top paragraph, where it says NRCS's goal is to leverage funds to double the federal conservation investment with partner contributions. And so as was pointed out earlier, we are looking at doubling the federal financial investment. But as pointed out earlier also, you know, that's not a hard and fast rule. We do look at all these parts. And just a side note, as Derek pointed out, the NRCS assistance, technically we are not supposed to provide any NRCS assistance that is outside of the RCPP proposal for the proposal. So we do request the NRCS portion of assistance be put in there, so we do need some technical assistance funds for the assistance that we're providing for the programs like EQIP or ACEP. And the percent of 20% was thrown out there, and that is a Oregon, each state, and actually each proposal can be negotiated, and Oregon has just established that, so it's clear and we don't have a lot of confusion, and it provides us with the needed assistance. But that's where we're at. It could change next year, and it actually, we do have a little different for PL 566 proposals, where we have to put a water management plan together, or a watershed management plan together. So that number can change, and I don't know, Brendan, in Montana what that was, but each state and each proposal can be negotiated. So flipping over to page 18, I'm running out of time quickly here. Solutions there. The thing I want to point out, that solutions are technically sound and locally supported. You know, we want to see those technical solutions. And point number 5 is something that's really emphasized. Does the project define measurable, achievable, and results-oriented goals that address the resource concern in a comprehensive and cost-effective manner? Basically, we're looking at, are the solutions moving the natural resource concern needle? If you can show that we're creating this much habitat, which is going to benefit this species, or we're reducing stream sedimentation by such and such a percent, we're going to pull that reach off the TMDL, that's a great solution for your project. And so how are you moving that resource concern needle? And also in that consideration, point number 7 has, does the project extend or advance an existing project? As both Brendan and Derek talked about, they have previous projects in the area. Is there, and the proposal kind of extends or is based on some of that experience in the past? Are there other lists or plans, like Oregon has the strategic ODF&W strategic plan? If that's another project plan that supports the RCPP proposal, those are great supports to make sure you include in your proposal. Okay, on the quick ride here, over to page 23, Appendix A. So here we have the definitions, and actually, as Derek pointed out, administrative costs are defined here, and they are not cost eligible for your RCPP proposal. You cannot ask for NRCS funding for administrative costs, but you can include them in as your contribution toward the project. So make sure you don't cut yourself short in saying, well, we can't put any administrative costs in. Well, it's only that you can't ask for administrative costs, but you can include them in the proposal. And then there's a lot of definitions. I won't go through reading them all, but definitely read through that. And again, if you have questions on definitions, contact your local district conservationist. Then I want to flip back to page 35, Appendix C. Here's a great summary of each program. So if you're kind of wondering, well, how does our project, what programs fit in our project, and again, hopefully you've been working with NRCS and you have that experience, but maybe you have a little bit of does this fit, or could we adapt this program? Here's a great start to get an idea, and then read through these definitions on the next, let's see, it's about 10 pages, and you can get a lot of your questions answered, or you can get a lot of questions developed based on what the information is here. And then finally, on page 46, Appendix E. Let's see. Are we missing? Now I have it page 46 on my APF that I printed out. One more page there, Mike. Appendix E is where I want to go. There we go. So this is what's included in the data entry tool, which you will need to put the information in, and it should be up and running, but if it's not, you can get started by using this as a guide. Let's see, it has the website there. I'm not quite sure if the data entry tool is on the website, but here's what's included. Just a thing that seems to be overlooked every once in a while, and then we scramble at the end, is the lead partner receives the federal funds, so they'll be the one that needs to have a DUNS number, DUNS and SAMS registration, so you'll have to get that. But just go through this, and as Derek pointed out, it's good to know what's required, and you can start divvying up and making sure you cover everything. And then there'll be practice narratives that you need to do, as that executive summary points out, and then other practice narratives. So that, number 8 on the next page there, is the practice narrative. So there'll be very specific questions that you need to answer, and I think there's about a 250-word limit on each of those narratives. So make sure you get the data entry tool up and running so that you can start inputting that stuff. Well, that was a quick joyride overview. I hope that helped. I think it was great to have Brendan and Derek and Julia really provided a lot of background and basis. So that's it. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
Thank you so much, Lauren. We had our seatbelts on and it was fun. So we did get a question. I'm hoping Crystal with Klamath Lake Land Trust is still on the line. So
Yeah,
you're unmuted, Crystal. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious about the Healthy Forest Reserve program. What I just noticed in Oregon is that it appeared that the NRCS priority appeared to be around spotted owl habitat. And I mean, can you comment at all about what that might look like for any of the Oregon's forests that aren't in spotted owl habitat?
Sure, Crystal. You're correct. HFRP currently in Oregon focuses in on the spotted owl. And any HFRP across the nation has to target a species on the T&E list or even a species of concern. And so if you have a forest there that, let's say I'm in Redmond right now, so I'm going to pick on the spotted frog. So if we had a forest here in the Redmond area that had spotted frog, you could actually write that up. You need to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service and get a treatment way to help that. I can't remember exactly what that's called now. I apologize, but you can pick a different target species, and that would be part of your proposal. And as Brandon and I think Derek both said, you don't want to front load that because that's going to take some in your project. You want to take, okay, we're working on getting a agreement with Fish and Wildlife Service and how to treat this in a treatment for this species in this forest area, and that's going to take the first year of our proposal. So we're going to go slow, and so make sure you have those considerations, and go online, look at HFRP, look at the HFRP information in the end of the APF there, and definitely you can give me a call or talk to Barry. Actually, would be the best on HFRP, and we can work through if you have other parts in the state that are working. But then again, if you have a forest in the spotted owl area, that's already been built, all that agreement and information has been built, so you are ahead of the game with the spotted owl, but it can be done on other species in other forest parts of the state.
Thank you.
You bet.
Lauren, we've got another question that someone typed in. This is from Sarah Steele. She says, just to be clear, a conservation easement qualifies as a, quote, project as defined by RCPP project definitions, correct?
Yes, it has to fit the conservation easement program, so the ACEP, but it has to fit either in ALE or HFRP or WRE, but it can fit. Any project that you have, well, I'll even qualify that. Any project you want funded has to meet our programs. But if you have other projects, say you've got some easements that you're doing with other funding, those can count toward the contribution. So don't forget that. Does that help, Sarah?
Yes, she says. Thanks.
She said yes.
Good.
Great. Any other questions from the participants? Let's just switch back to the side. We're going to move it. We're right on track here. Thank you so much, Lauren. That was really helpful. I want to just show a quick slide in case you don't know which basin you fall in. Here's a visual of the basins in Oregon. And just to underscore the importance, your next step as an applicant, will, if you haven't already, is talk to your basin leader. And so the next slide is just a roster of those basin team leaders, or around the state. And again, this will be part of the PowerPoint, and we'll send out the link. The PDF you print out or bring up on your desktop will have these linked. So they will have live links. We're going to do one more poll just to shake everything up. We've got a few more minutes. Just out of our curiosity, we're going to do a poll among the participants to, first poll is, have you ever applied to an RCP, oh, I'm sorry, first poll is, are you thinking about submitting a pre-proposal? It would just be great to get a sense out there of the participants. Mike's going to put the poll up. It should be up right now, so are you thinking about submitting this coming pre-proposal cycle? And again, we've got districts, councils, partner organizations, land trusts out there, and I think, Lauren, based on your description of the eligible entities, those all fit in there. So, okay, so Mike's going to bring up the results. Great. So it looks like there's some folks that are still considering. We have some definite 31% participants are going to be going for it. Sounds like some folks are just listening and maybe on the agency side. And hopefully that this webinar will help convince those who are still considering answer some questions. So I think with that, we'll just go, we'll wrap it up. I just want to thank NRCS for sponsoring this. Oh, actually, before we thank, Lauren already covered these, but just to reiterate so you have them on your calendar, a really few key dates you should know. April 21st, pre-proposals due. June 26th, the announcement of the selected pre-proposals. August 31st, full proposal applications due. And then November 2017, the announcement of selected proposals. And as Lauren said, you'll be hearing about some additional webinars. And with that, I'll go into what I was saying about just thanking NRCS. Have been a great partner here in Oregon, really supportive of the land trust community and our partners, and really fostering these regional synergies. And so thank you, Lauren, for participating and sponsoring this. Please be in touch if you have any questions, would like to follow up with us. My email is up on the website, or up on the webinar. So please go ahead and send me an email if there's any follow-up. Otherwise, you will be getting a survey. So thank you very much, and thanks to Mike for being the assistant here on the back end. Have a great day, everybody.